You're listening to the Cinemental podcast.
Shall we begin?
Okay, welcome back to the Cinemental podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, as well as being a formidable competitor on the go-kart track, is a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Jeff, I think you mean a formidable competitor on the Mario Kart track.
No. You and I have done go-karting a couple times recently, and I fear you in my rear view, you know?
Well, it's because of the aerodynamic quality of the old dome here.
We want you to start your week off right with our podcast, so we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips, and now full episodes on YouTube. Today, Josh, we're talking about F1. A movie that is just full of mental health nuance.
Well, it is, actually. We talk about this all the time, Jeff. Almost any movie that's well made is full of nuanced mental health issues, and F1
100%.
is no different.
And also, you know, if you haven't caught on by now, you viewers and listeners, oftentimes we just use movies as a foray into talking about what we want. And today, you know, we're going to have an awesome conversation about, competition and nature competition. Anyway, F1 follows a washed-up former Formula One driver who returns to the grid to mentor a hotshot rookie, only to realize he still has something to prove himself. It's a high-speed story about legacy, ego, and whether experience can still outrun youth when everything is on the line. Josh, what are the topics we're going to cover today?
So, Jeff, we're going to talk about trauma, as we often talk about trauma in movies.
Sure.
We're going to talk about the difference in folks' reaction to trauma, whether it crosses the line to a pathologic condition such as PTSD, or whether there's something, mental healthy about just losing your edge. We're also going to talk about the flow state, which is a super interesting psychological phenomenon that athletes, among other high performers, often try to attain, which is associated with dissociation. And we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about how wrong you are about mentorship.
I love it. Okay, so F1, Josh, follows Sonny Hayes, brilliantly portrayed by Brad Pitt, who was a once promising Formula One driver whose career was derailed by a devastating crash, which, is obviously something that they just never delve into, leaving him to disappear into obscurity. Years later, he's pulled back into the sport when an old friend convinces him to join a failing F1 team as both a driver and mentor to their volatile young star. As the races pile up, Sonny clashes with team management, struggles to keep pace with the modern grid, and repeatedly butts heads with the rookie, whose hunger to win mirrors Sonny's younger self. The season builds toward a final showdown where team loyalty, personal redemption, and the cost of chasing one last victory collide at full speed. Josh, I want to dive into the talk about healthy competition. I don't know that there's... Usually we start with you giving us a diagnosis of a particular character. I don't think that's worth doing here, correct?
Yeah, I agree. Let's just dive right into healthy competition.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about healthy competition. And one of the things that I think is interesting about F1, and I do think that they nailed in this movie, is the really difficult nature of competing in F1, where you are on a team, but you are absolutely incentivized to beat your teammate. And yet you have to also function as a team. And so it happens all the time where people butt heads about like, okay, hey, you got to let this person go in front of you. It's good for the team. And the driver doesn't want to do it. And so I think it's a really, and I think that they nailed that mentality and that sort of discourse in this film. But what does healthy competition look like? And how can it spill over into being unhealthy?
Healthy competition is really good for your brain. We know that. It helps you grow. It helps you test yourself usually in our society nowadays, in a contained environment where the risks are relatively low. You're not usually going to die. You're not usually going to get harmed or lose material wealth. You are testing yourself against others. And if done right, and I'm not even saying healthy competition is necessarily like, hey, everybody gets a participation trophy. I'm not actually sure that's totally healthy competition.
Okay.
I'm talking about, you versus me, my team versus you. Let's test each other. Let's push forward. That's really, really good for the brain. It allows you to test out hypotheses, even subconsciously, about how do I get better. You can apply those lessons to different parts of your life. It's generally recognized as a very good thing.
Right. So competition is recognized as because I think that the healthy part is where we can kind of argue as to what is healthy, what is not. But competition in general is a pretty healthy thing.
Unhealthy competition, and again, there's some judgment that is going on here. Unhealthy competition, I think, is one that doesn't push somebody ahead or pushes somebody ahead while they're learning maladaptive lessons, or, to put it in your terms, Jeff, shitty lessons about how to be crappy to other people, to cut them down and to move ahead. That I think is unhealthy competition. Also, the competition of which you start to self-destruct, where you're not quite reaching your goals, or your goals become so unattainable, or you're harming yourself in such way to get to those goals that you're doing unhealthy things to your body.
And isn't that competition with yourself,
things to your mind?
Isn't there a difference between like competing with yourself and competing with another person? Because what you just said sounds more like competing with yourself.
Well, I think all competition is competing with yourself to some extent. I mean, I can be playing against you in a one-on-one basketball game, and even though I'm up against you, Jeff, 15-5, I'm still competing against myself about how I'm doing, how I'm shooting, what I'm thinking. So yeah, the competition against others is real, but competition against and with yourself is constantly going on.
Yeah. So in the beginning of F1, when Sonny first joins the team, they're in last place. They're running, I think, 20th and 19th, or 22nd and 21st, however many cars there are, I forget. And they tell Sonny to let Joshua Pierce pass, and Sonny refuses. He's like, I'm not going to let him pass. And he's like, sorry, Josh, if you want the spot, you got to race for it. And they end up colliding and skidding off and ruining both cars. Healthy or unhealthy competition?
Well, I mean, unhealthy competition, they ended up crashing. I mean, that's, A, incredibly expensive, B, defeats the purpose of the race, C, really, really dangerous at that level. So I would say 100% unhealthy competition. Now, a lot of the lens, I think, with which we judge whether something was healthy or unhealthy competition is unfortunately retrospective, right?
That's right. Because I think it's 0%. I don't think it's 100%. I think it's 0%. I think it was absolutely healthy competition.
You do?
Yeah.
Why do you think that was healthy?
Because the point wasn't to crash. And they could have been in first and second, and the racing manager was like, hey, let him pass, and then there was an accident. You have to race. And, Brad Pitt's whole point was like, if you want to beat me, beat me. Like, let's see how you race. And so it was a little bit of them sort of feeling each other out. I don't think there's anything wrong with practicing competing. It's a little unhealthy in that you're not following, like, the rules of the coach. A coach is there for a reason. We should follow what the coach says. They tell Joshua Pierce, look, if you want the spot, you got to go get it. That's true of the other 20 drivers on the grid, that you have to compete for spots. So just because it's teammates, I don't think that there's anything wrong with practicing competing. The fact that they ended up wrecking, sure, that part sucks, but there's no way that that happens. But you're always competing for spots.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with competing either. But you asked about this particular point. I mean, I think the fact that they crashed was heightened by the way that they were competing. I don't think it was particularly healthy. Here's another reason why I don't think that was a particularly healthy competition, is that the ground rules of the competition really weren't laid out beforehand, right? Brad Pitt had this secret set of requirements requirements against which he was judging Joshua Pierce. How much can you come at me? I mean, they didn't really set it up that they brought in Brad Pitt to challenge Joshua Pierce in a particular way. He was supposed to teach him some stuff, but they didn't really set up how that was going to go. Yeah.
So you're saying it would have been more healthy had they told Joshua Pierce, like, hey, this guy's going to challenge you. He's here to kind of mentor you. I mean, he tells Brad Pitt, you're coming here to really help my young driver and to mentor him.
Yeah, we knew. I don't.
That's
think
what I'm
Joshua
saying. So you're
Pierce
saying it
knew.
would have been
Yeah.
healthier if they'd have told Josh Pierce.
I do think so.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So Jeff, F1 got nominated for Best Picture.
Yes, it did.
Was this a good movie?
Great question. And I give the Oscars credit for having the kind of spectacle award. I do think that spectacle movies are often overlooked, when it comes to the Oscars. This movie in particular, and I really don't like to crap on films. There's enough channels that do that. There's enough people that do that.
Sure.
But I do think that there is kind of a learning moment that can happen here with F1. F1 was not a bad movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But from a story perspective, this was a very flawed film. I've just noticed, and I don't know if it's that writers are coming up like learning how to write like on YouTube, but there's a real fundamental misunderstanding of what a story is, and I think that you saw that play out with F1. F1 had 5 competing storylines, and it ended up being kind of a muddied mess. And the easiest way to think about it, and where people are going kind of awry, story is not a clear want. And that's what I think people are learning, is that like if a character has a clear want, then you have a story. And that's not true. It's half of the truth, but it's not even the important half. It's having a clear want and then changing as a result of chasing that want. You cannot have a story unless you have change. And so you had these 5 competing storylines in F1. There was the car crash, where he was supposed to deal with the effects of the car crash. That would be a great movie. We saw that with Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder was a great movie that explored, get over your fear, find your edge again. That would be a good movie. You've got the old guy returning to help, the aged mentor, Major League. That was a great movie.
Or even Bull Durham.
Bull Durham's a great example. You've got the guilt over your teammate getting injured. That's a great setup for a story. Show me Top Gun. Great movie. You got a maverick pilot who, his buddy dies and he's gotta learn to get back in the saddle. That would have been a great movie. Will they work as a team? Let's look at Miracle. Great movie about a bunch of individuals coming together to work as a team. This is the one that's like the most ridiculous to me, Josh, but I kind of loved it. The whole plot line they had about him like slaying new dragons and like constantly winning and walking away. Show me Kane from Kung Fu. He's walking the land, helping all these people solve their problems. And then just like walking away, I'll see you down the road. And unfortunately, like, these were billed as just kind of like obstacles, but they didn't work because they clashed with each other. If he has the desire to be the fastest man to reach this flow state, then why is he walking away from F1? And
right.
if there's this issue with him being the perfect teammate, why does he become the perfect teammate a third of the way through the movie when he's all of a sudden like crashing into walls so that Josh can win? Like, he doesn't feel any guilt over Josh crashing. He knows it wasn't his fault. And they spend 0 time having him get over having been in a car crash 20 years prior.
Yeah.
And so all of these parts of the movie really clash with it. They were piled on in an attempt to make it more dramatic, but that's kind of like a chef throwing in every spice to try and make a dish more tasty. It just becomes a muddled mess. They could have done a really good story, and I think that this was a story about mentorship, and it should have been about mentorship, and instead it was weirdly about like chasing the flow state. But that's why I didn't love this movie, is because I do think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a story is, and I'm starting to see it more and more in movies.
Well, Jeff, that is really interesting because you started out the podcast by saying, Josh, we usually have you talk about a character's diagnosis, and it would have been easy to have the Brad Pitt character be the one about which you should have had a diagnosis.
Sure.
But with all these things piled on, he ended up being a pretty flat character, which is really unusual for a Brad Pitt played character, right? I mean, his characters have depth, and this one was just kind of 5 tropes hung together.
That's right. That's exactly
Wow,
right. And
that's really interesting.
And they didn't really work. There's a part of a movie called the exploration of theme. It's usually after, there's a big event, the big event in this movie probably being like the wreck of Joshua Pierce. And it's where a character kind of slows down and is like, God, do I really want to change? Like, this journey is costing me a lot. And so they really think about whether they want to continue. And the exploration of theme scene in this movie was when he's talking to Carrie Condon about the flow state. And he's saying like, oh man, I'm chasing that high. I'm chasing that high. And it's like, that's the most important thing to him. But the battle scene in this movie is whether or not Josh and him can work as a team.
Right.
And then once they do work as a team, and once it's, they have that decision where like Lewis Hamilton is in front of them, and Lewis is going to block whoever goes first, and Brad Pitt makes the choice to go first so that Lewis blocks him and Josh can win. That's a great battle scene. That's a great moment where Brad Pitt gives up, what he wants. And then Lewis and Joshua crash, and then all of a sudden Brad Pitt now can get his flow state. And it's like, it wasn't earned at all.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is he doing? He's flying. It's like, oh, okay. It wasn't earned in any shape or form. So yeah, this was flat because it was just such a muddled mess.
Beautiful muddled mess. I mean, it was beautiful.
Well shot. Well shot. And I should look at who wrote it, but like, obviously Kaczynski shot this and he shot Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick's a great film, and it's a very clear want and a very clear, change because of the journey. Top Gun Maverick was an exceptional film, and this was not, and it was as well shot as Top Gun, but a director does not fully a movie make. You have to have a great script, you have to have a great story.
I guess, Jeff, the real question is, was it a good enough movie that there's going to be an audience for F2?
Oh, that's a good joke, Josh. Well done. Were you just sitting there the entire time with that in the chamber?
For like 3 days. For 3 days. Yeah, I've had that. I've had it in the chamber for 3 days. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have to be F1 2. That's just weird.
F12? I'm doing F12? F12. Wait a minute. I'm doing F12. I'm doing screen print? I don't understand.
Okay, so Josh, this movie was probably about the flow state. That's what cared the most to Brad Pitt, was that feeling of flying. Let's talk about the flow state, what it is. How do you get there?
Man, it is so incredible. I don't know if you've actually felt it or not. I feel it a few times when I am skiing, but it's this sense of heightened awareness and dilated time. Mm-hmm. That a lot of athletes and actually musicians spend a lot of time seeking, where everything just feels right. It was really best described by a scientist, a psychologist named Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, and who's got great books on flow state and how to try to achieve it. It's a state where all your neurons seem to be firing together, where you may actually have like a sense of euphoria. The time dilation part, I think, is really interesting, where your sense of time feels like things actually slow down. Mm-hmm. And most athletes talk about trying to achieve this. Michael Jordan has talked about having this flow state in the middle of games, where it just seems like, he can see the rotation on the ball. And so that's the state that Brad Pitt's character is trying to get to. And from interviews with high-level athletes, it does seem that the better you are, the more often you can achieve this flow state. What it actually is in the brain, we don't really know. We don't really know how the neurons are working together or what chemicals are going on there to achieve this. But we do know that it's pretty rare. It's really sought after. And then a lot of athletes continue to try to get back to that because that's where they feel that they are activating their best.
So we can add to the list Star Trek Generations, where Malcolm McDowell is trying to get back to that weird, euphoric place. So this F1 was also Star Trek Generations.
No. No, not even a tiny little bit. That was a swing and a miss. You were not in the flow state with that humorous callback.
Yeah, I've definitely felt the flow state during basketball. You know, I mean, I was obviously a basketball player for a long time. I've also felt it during track. You know, when I jumped my highest jump ever, you know, which was 6'7". Not trying to be a meme there, just that's the highest I ever jumped. I definitely felt the flow state. Just everything seemed slow. The time dilation is so incredibly interesting, and I could just see why people, you know, want to get back there. I don't know that I'll ever get back there again. I've got sort of no reason to. I guess I do feel it sometimes during surfing, and you almost like kind of are immediately put into it when you're surfing. Like being on a wave and feeling like the power of the ocean behind you, you know, is so spectacular. It's sort of like does kick you into that flow state.
It's a little bit like a dissociative phenomenon where you know, some people will describe the flow state as if they're actually watching themselves do this stuff. Yeah. So that's, you know, that is just, I mean, that's the description of dissociation.
Yeah. One of the things I think is interesting about the flow state, Josh, is gamblers will talk about this and they'll apply this to sports. And I think it's really interesting where gamblers will say, you know, if you've missed 10 shots in a row, and you usually shoot about 33%, then the chance that you're going to make your next shot is 33%. Because the percentages don't change. It just sometimes you miss. It's like flipping a coin. And it's like gamblers have no understanding, I think, of the flow state, which is weird because I would imagine you can get into the flow state even playing something like poker. Sports is not as much of a numbers game as people think it is. There really is something to when a guy has the hot hand, you feed him. You know, he's not just making a few shots because statistically it's an it's anomaly. He's probably in the flow state, and he is more likely to make that next shot because he's in the flow state. And I think that's such an interesting thing that like a lot of people don't understand. Like the hot hand does make sense in sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. I used to say when we were warming up and I was just done warming up, I would just stop and walk off and just say, I don't want to waste my makes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, let's talk about PTSD because this was another one of the 5 movies that we saw in F1. This is something I don't understand, Josh. I don't understand how you come back from a crash. And these guys crash all the time. But when the crash is so bad that there's flames around you and you get a real injury, I don't understand being able to come back. I've never understood it. I think it would make me fold. And maybe that's just a difference between me and, you know, the people who are absolutely top in their field. But like, how do you come back from that? Because I don't, and I think you're going to agree with me here and differentiate it. Just because you have an accident doesn't mean you're going to feel PTSD. And I don't think a lot of these guys necessarily feel PTSD when they get in a really bad crash.
They probably don't. Jeff, I haven't done a ton of research into this. I don't know if people have done a ton of research into this at all. But, you know, the folks that are operating at this high level of risk, you know, whether you're an F1 racer, a race car driver, or, you know, like a ski racer who goes through a horrific crash, I think a lot of them are able to go right back to it. They're probably wired to the thrill-seeking phenomenon to an extent that it may overpower some of that re-experiencing of the trauma. They may just not have that mechanism as much dialed in. But a lot of people do have PTSD-like symptoms after a trauma like this. My suspicion is that folks that have, folks that are doing the F1 racing or the NASCAR racing and they have a horrific accident, they're such a valuable commodity that their team, their support system is putting other things around them. They're probably doing counseling of some sort, if not sports psychologists and some kind of therapy to tackle, you know, what it's like to get back into the cockpit, or what is it like to do that again? What's it like to think about that stuff? Obviously, the Sonny character had some symptoms of PTSD. He was reliving some of the crash. He had some nightmares, things like that. So I think he had that. And then he also talked about dropping into this just self-destructive, compulsive gambling side of him for years before he tried to work his way back into racing, even just driving a cab for a bit, which you can look as a first step into getting back into racing. And he didn't go right back into high-level racing. He was doing dirt tracks.
Josh,
and
all of that would have been a much better movie. Seriously, like, like him trying to get back to racing and and seeing him get, like, they were like, oh, he's a degenerate gambler. Is he? I haven't seen it.
Well, that's gonna be in the prequel F0.5.
There you go. I think that, like, and I've seen this happen in the development process, because I have certainly had people who have developed scripts of mine, and they're like, what if he's a degenerate gambler? And it's like, okay, well, what do you want that to look like? And like, well, just drop in a line where he's a degenerate gambler, and then we know. And it's like, that's not the way story works, man. We got to see it. We got to see it. We got to experience it. It's got to cost him something.
Isn't it true in storytelling that you always want to tell, not show?
Absolutely. Just tell us. just say it.
Drop in a line of exposition.
I got a massive drug problem. Anyway. Oh, man. That is deep. I was once in a plane crash. Altered my perception of fear. Anyway, let me get in this car and drive really fast. Okay, here we go. Whee!
I do want to contrast PTSD, which is the extreme to experiencing trauma, versus what happens to a lot of athletes, which is losing their edge. Right. And a lot of sports psychology is around helping folks, athletes who feel that they've lost their edge. You have this phenomenon called the yips that was famous in golf for a while, where you couldn't make a putt. There was some short circuit, probably in your anxiety mechanism, that was causing you to jerk, to miss stuff. That's pretty common for athletes, to kind of lose your edge. Different sports call it different things. I think we'll all remember, Simone Biles talking about her Olympic experience 2 Olympic cycles ago, where she got the twisties up in the air and just kind of lost her edge and said, this isn't safe. I need to back out of this highest moment.
Yeah.
Because it's not safe. I think that was so ballsy of her, and absolutely the right thing to do. If you're putting yourself in danger because you've, quote, lost your edge or whatever, take a step back, regroup, do the work, and get back to being safe.
I agree with you. I think that Simone was in a different situation because she had won so much. I don't think that people who haven't won as much can do that. If you get the yips and have to back out of something because of the yips, you're very likely to just not get that opportunity again, because people aren't going to believe in you. They're going to be like, well, then maybe this is the type of person who gets the yips. You mentioned it earlier about, like, their support systems in place for, these drivers who get into crashes. I actually disagree with that. I think that probably what happens is they have to pretend that they're fine. Otherwise, someone's going to make a financial decision to bring in a driver who's more confident. I just recently saw an interview with Bo Jackson, and he was talking about, like, pre-concussion protocols. Mm-hmm. And, somebody hit him so hard, and he was like, I have to pretend that I'm fine. I got to get up so that people don't see that I'm weak. And he got over to the sideline. He's like, just make it to the sideline. Just make it to the sideline. And he made it to the sideline. And then the other team was like, hey, get out of here, because he'd gone to the wrong sideline. But this is Bo Jackson talking about how he had to pretend he didn't have a concussion, especially early on in your career. You have to pretend you're not hurt. You have to pretend you're not scared, which I think is again, I don't know that that's even all that unhealthy, if it gets you where you need to go. I want to get back to that conversation, but let's power through a couple other things, because let's talk about mentorship. Once you get to a certain age, is it owed to the next generation that you become a mentor?
Yes.
No. Go. Defend your yes.
Okay. Now, thanks for joining us on Cinemental. This has been a great podcast. I think it's absolutely owed to the next generation. As nobody gets here on their own. Sure. Everybody has some support system. Hopefully everybody has a mentor or 2 or 3 that has allowed you to get to where you are. Of course I'm talking about an idealized situation. But yeah, especially coming up in the medical profession, I have had mentors. They have given to the next generation, partly, or maybe even mostly, out of a pay it forward mentality. And if we want if we want good younger people to step up and come behind us and then support us when we're no longer able to do our best, mentorship has to be part of every single conversation in every organization about the future.
Okay, I see your point, and I think that it works for the medical profession, where like the goal is is helping people.
Works for all professions. It works for every situation. Every single one, Jeff.
Okay, well, let's move on. I don't think it works in sports, and like I think about the times in my life where I'm like, okay, I hit the thing that I want to hit. I'm there, and it took me everything. It took everything I had to get to the place that I wanted to be. And I think that where people make a mistake, and this is a lot of athletes do this, you'll especially see it with like boxers or anybody who achieves like a world championship status. You get to a certain level and you think that it is then owed to you from then on. And so you take your foot off the gas. And then that's all of a sudden how you get beat. And Mike Tyson getting beat by Buster Douglas was Tyson having he just didn't train that hard. And it's like you need to continually train as hard as you did to get to where you wanted to be. And mentorship slows that down. And I don't have any issue with somebody deciding that their championship, their greatness, is what they're concentrating on. And when that is done and gone and they're retired, then they can think about mentorship. But this idea that Sonny Hayes owed anything to mentor Joshua Pierce, I just disagree with. To think that like Aaron Rodgers owed mentorship to Jordan Love or any of the quarterbacks, if any of these old quarterbacks owe mentorship, I completely disagree. They're there for a job, and their only duty is to do that job to the best of their abilities. Now, obviously, in Brad Pitt's case in this movie, it's a different situation because he was brought in there to mentor. That was part of his job. But that was part of the job. I don't think that mentorship is just owed universally. I think that achieving excellence for yourself, it's okay if that's your primary, if only, motivation.
Well, let me first extend my apology to you, Jeff, for having mentored you into a position where you could have such a wrong opinion. So, yeah, first of all, obviously in F1, he owed it to Joshua Pierce because that was his job. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about, do you owe it just generally to the next generation? And I would say yes, because you can do both. I don't think that working your hardest to be your best precludes also mentoring somebody. I just don't think that those two things are at odds with each other. Not at all.
I totally disagree. I remember the day that I did jump 6'7" in the high jump, and I spent the entire day visualizing the jump. And I spent the entire day visualizing, what I was going to do, how I was going to move my body, et cetera, et cetera. If someone were to come by and be like, hey, would you mentor so-and-so for an hour? I don't think I would have been my best. And I didn't owe it to that person. I owed it to myself to be the absolute best that I could be.
Yeah, but you're talking about a moment in time. You don't have to do it right in that moment. You can do both things.
I disagree. I think if you're going to absolutely be the best you can be, you got to be 100% focused. To be a great mentor, you've got to try. You've got to try and be good at it. No, all that effort should be put into you being excellent at the thing you want to do. Now, once you retire, once you're done with it, absolutely go back and mentor. Absolutely. In the moment when you're still competing at the highest level, I absolutely disagree with you. The mentorship is owed.
Again, I'm going to talk about my own experience here. I do not think that it is my practice in a lot of different things. I do not think I've ever operated at my best unless I was also mentoring somebody or helping somebody else out. Maybe, I've never competed at the highest level of an NFL quarterback or things like that, but and it is another thing, it is different being a mentor versus, you're here to train your replacement, even though you don't want to be replaced. I think those are different things, and I don't think that's the same. You can be a mentor to somebody while also trying to compete with them. I think that those two things are not necessarily preclusive of each other.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think at this point we just need to agree to disagree on that one, which is okay.
Well, hey, folks, put in the comments below how wrong Jeff is about this.
Oh, wonderful. All right, Josh, let's talk a little bit more about healthy competition, because I've been thinking a ton about this since watching the movie and deciding that we were going to talk about this. And I'm having a really hard time thinking about something that is unhealthy competition, except for one thing. And it's what I call the crabs in a bucket mentality.
Okay.
And it's essentially, the crabs in a bucket is, there's a bunch of crabs in a bucket, and when one starts to get out, the other crabs will drag it down. And so no crabs end up getting out of the bucket. And maybe if they work together, they could get out of the bucket, but that's never what happens. And so you got crabs in a bucket. And I see this all the time. I even saw it when I was an agent and watching, and training other agents. And people would almost try and sabotage somebody's growth so that they wouldn't outpace them. And it would be sort of akin to if someone's like passing you and you ram into them. That to me is then unhealthy competition. But anything short of that, I don't know. I think it's all okay. I remember a time, you remember Jeff Bailey?
Yeah, Jeff Bailey.
Yeah. So Jeff was a year older than me, and we were playing in a Rose Valley basketball game. And I was a year younger than him, and so he was, sort of the big dog, and he gave me an elbow in the game, and I gave him an elbow back. And then we just started elbowing each other over and over, and the ref was like, we were kids. The ref was like, guys, would you just fell on both of you? Would you just stop? And we both were like, yeah, absolutely. And I saw Jeff on the playground the next day, and he was like, right on, man. You didn't back down. And I was like, we were trying to kind of hurt each other in that moment, but I'm like, I don't think any of that was all that unhealthy. I don't think there was anything wrong with him throwing that elbow, and I don't think there was anything wrong with me throwing an elbow back. So I guess my question to you is, do you agree with the crabs in a bucket, and do you think that there's anything I'm missing that you think is unhealthy competition?
I agree with the crabs in a bucket. And I think of that more as like competition when people think that it is an absolute zero-sum game.
Yes.
And that people would rather it be a negative-sum game than have it be a zero-sum game where they're not on top.
Okay, that's well said. Talk about what a zero-sum game is, because I think that's actually really, really well said.
Well, a zero-sum game, it's going to sound a little counterintuitive. The zero-sum game is where there can't be a winner unless there's a loser. And I know what you're going to say. Well, that's competition.
No,
Well,
no, I'm not going to say that. That's why I agree with you.
Okay, some people are going to say that. Well, sure, but if you win, somebody else must lose. Yes, if you're talking just about the score of the game.
Right.
But if you're talking about elevating the overall, the intangibles about competition, then it's not a zero-sum game. But this zero-sum game is when I can only win if you lose. I can only make $100 if you lose $100. That's the zero-sum game. And then the crabs in the bucket problem is when people are like, okay, I am so against there even being a zero-sum game, I'm going to tear the whole thing down so no one can win.
Yeah.
Now you and Jeff Bailey throw an elbows. And by the way, Jeff Bailey, Kelso High grad, Boston Red Sox player, great athlete. Privileged to throw elbows with him.
Absolutely.
That was healthy competition. Nobody got hurt.
Good.
Nobody got hurt.
I'm glad you agree.
You're feeling out the bounds of where that's at.
Yeah, and I didn't think you were going to disagree with me that was healthy. And I wish we could talk forever about the zero-sum game, because I think that you're absolutely right about that. And it's tough in sports where it is a zero-sum game. There is one winner and 19 losers in F1. There is in sort of every sport. There's going to be a winner and a loser. And we can have a healthy mindset about it, but I don't necessarily think that anything is unhealthy, competition. God, I remember this R.A. Long game. There was this kid who was just trying to hurt me, and I was like, that to me is, unhealthy competition. Like I look at Draymond Green, I'm like, that's unhealthy competition. Just cheap shotting somebody and putting somebody's health in danger. Yeah. I think that's unhealthy competition. Like Jeff Bailey elbowing me, he wasn't trying to take me out of the game. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so if you're trying to take somebody out of the game, that to me becomes, unhealthy competition.
So Jeff, let me ask you this about the F1 movie. The tactics that Brad Pitt's character does that do cross the line and can get people hurt. Was that unhealthy competition?
I don't think it was. He never runs into anybody. he always only ever like injures his own car, or he runs into them in a way that's like the elbow, where it's not going to like, take them out of the race. He's just trying to create, some chaos on the track. But to me, all of that is just really smart. It's knowing the rules, and it's bending the rules kind of to your will, sort of thing. Like, I don't have any issue. I'm having a hard time thinking of anything he did during that movie that I thought was unhealthy competition. And if you can exploit the rules, great. There needs to be then somebody who like changes the rules. This is a deep cut, but I'm thinking of like the Kenny Pickett slide when he was at LSU quarterback. And like, if you're a quarterback, you're protected if you slide. And he started to make a sliding moment, and the linebacker pulled up, and then he kept running. And I was like, that's really cheap. But I also don't think that that's unhealthy competition, because he just exploited that rule. I don't have an issue with people exploiting rules. We all agree to the rules. And so if you can kind of work in the gray areas, I'm good for you. I don't have any issue. But I think unhealthy competition is crabs in a bucket, attempting to take someone out of the competition. Anything short of that, man, I don't know. Like, I remember losing a basketball game 108-13, and these kids just kept pounding us. They did not, they were unrelenting trying to beat us. And I learned the most valuable lesson I ever learned in that game, which is the other team is not going to ever care about my feelings. And I need to get better. If I don't want to feel that way, I need to get better. But they didn't have any responsibility to let up. I thought that was fine.
Let me ask you this one. So I coached my daughter's 4th grade basketball team. The first time we played at this team, they beat us 108-2.
Right.
And they just were better than us. They were just better than us, and they weren't breaking the rules or anything like that. They were, you could press. It was one of these rollerball situations midway through the season, because this team was so dominant. They did change some rules. Right. And one of the rules they said was you have to match up each quarter so that people know who you're guarding. Well, the last time we played this team, was getting into the third quarter, and we were still getting beat, but it was like 60-48.
Right.
So we were much better, and we're like, hey, let's match up. And the other coach refused to let us match up.
Why?
Like, no, why? Because we were getting close to them. And he loved beating teams so badly. So he's like, nope, we're not going to match up. Our players know who they're at. I'm like, no, we match up. This is the rules, blah, blah, blah. Nope, won't do it. That's unhealthy competition.
No, I don't disagree with that, because I think there's something, and I don't know, there's obviously a gray area with like, when does someone become an adult? Like, I was a freshman in high school when this team beat us that bad, and I'm like, I don't have a problem with it. But like kids, like anybody younger than 10, 12, let's teach them sportsmanship. I don't have any problem with that. Like, it's just, if it's devastating to somebody's like development. Then there's a different thing. But also, like, as a coach, I probably would have ended it at halftime. I'd have been like, guys, you won. There's no reason to continue letting you just dominate my kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I thought that was a really interesting plot line in Friday Night Lights, the first game that when he's coaching, the East team, and he quits at halftime. That's one of my favorite coaches in cinema history, and he quits at halftime. Because his players were just getting hurt. He's like, that's not worth it.
Yeah, they're getting hurt. Yeah, that's different. That's unhealthy competition. So
but the other players weren't trying to take them out of the game. They were just getting hurt as a result of playing the game. But he still was like, you beat us. Good job.
Unhealthy competition is one of those things where it's difficult for me to define, but I know it when I see it.
Okay, Josh, we talked a little bit about F1 being a great spectacle, but not a great movie. But it made me think about the fact that there wasn't a Best Picture for sort of spectacle films until recently. Mm-hmm. And so I went back and made a list of the top 5 sort of spectacle films that should have won an Oscar.
Okay.
And probably should have been nominated for Best Picture. And I'm going to amend that and say they definitely should have been nominated for Best Picture. Some of these, I think, were the Best Picture that year, but they got snubbed because they were a spectacle film. And so this is the top 5 list that nobody asked for of spectacle films that should have at least been nominated for Best Picture, if not won.
Do you have any honorable mentions?
No, there's no reason to do an honorable mention here. This is just a straight up top 5.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'll come up with some honorable mentions after you do it. So
I love it. I love it.
All right, Jeff. What is your number 5?
All right, I'm going to immediately turn some people off here because they're going to think I'm a film bro. But number 5 is Interstellar. And to qualify for a great movie, you've got to have a want, and that want has to change. The journey of that want has to change you into a new person. Interstellar is a great example. Cooper wants to matter, but he also wants to save the world. On the surface, yes, he wants to save humanity, but emotionally, he wants to believe that his life has meaning beyond survival. The lesson that he learns, the future isn't saved, by logic alone. It's saved by love, his connection and his sacrifice. And he learns that love, is not a weakness, or a distraction. It's the only force strong enough to cross time itself. And in the end, it's his daughter that they name the ship after. And he comes back and he's like, oh, you guys named a ship after me. He's like, no, we named it after your daughter. And it's like, you know what? I don't need to matter the most. The fact that my daughter matters even more than I do, that's great. That's love. That's change. So, this was a blockbuster about accepting emotional limits. The hero doesn't win by conquering space. He wins by surrendering control and trusting in others. This was not a sci-fi bombast. It was about grief, parenthood, humility. It was a fantastic, fantastic film. Interstellar, my number 5.
All right. Number 4.
Number 4, we're going to go with Back to the Future.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, so this is such a great movie, and it was a great movie at the time. Yes, Marty wants to get home, but deeper than that, he wants some reassurance that his life and his parents' life aren't doomed to disappointment. And the lesson that he learns, small choices matter. Identity isn't fixed. It's shaped by courage in ordinary moments. And Marty learns that confidence, kindness, and initiative can rewrite a future that feels predetermined. It's a coming-of-age story disguised as a time travel comedy. And I'm going to talk about comedies here in a second. The lesson isn't change the past. It's engage with your present. And that thematic clarity is why this movie is so immortal. He sort of teaches his dad confidence. And that confidence, when he's young, changes him forever. And, it makes me think about all the decisions we now are going to echo through time. All the decisions we make in the moment. This was a great film, and comedy is so grossly underlooked when it comes to Best Picture. Most comedies tell a really brilliant dramatic story.
Yeah. Marty McFly goes back in time and realizes that small choices matter, like the choice to not sleep with your mom. Perfect.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you for that reductionist
Number 3
analysis. Number 3 is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. What a great story about humanity through the lens of a robot. Sarah Connor wants to prevent the apocalypse. She's driven by fear, rage, and, certainty that violence is the only solution. She's ruined her child. But in the end, the future isn't saved by becoming more ruthless. It's saved by choosing empathy. Sarah learns that survival without humanity isn't victory, and even machines can learn restraint. And so humans must too. This is an action movie about de-escalation. The hero learns to stop, not strike. The emotional arc becomes, a mother choosing hope over vengeance. That is profound storytelling. And in the end, Arnold chooses, this robot chooses, hey, I've got to kill myself in order for this to be truly over. And that last moment where he, lowers himself into the fire is such a human moment done by this, big Arnold Schwarzenegger looking robot. It's a great film.
I love this movie so much. I will always love this movie. All right, Jeff, number 2.
Number 2, yes, I'm a Nolanite. But The Dark Knight. And people felt like this was a snub at the time. I know you didn't love it, sure. Bruce Wayne obviously wants, Gotham to be saved. And in the end, he learns that he needs to become the Dark Knight. He needs to give them something to chase. humanity is flawed in a way that like we need a villain. Had a very, very clear theme where if you're the hero long enough, you will become the villain. We see this all the time. It's sort of, parodies celebrity culture where we love to see a downfall. And the great part about Batman is he loves us so much that he will become the hero, that he'll become anybody we need him to be. And right now we need him to be the Dark Knight. It was a great movie. It was an absolute spectacle. Heath Ledger's performance was absolutely transformative. This is still one of my favorite movies of all time, and it 100% deserved to be nominated for Best Picture.
I'll be the hero they need me to be. All right, Jeff, your number one movie here.
I still think that you're in my idea for a Bane and Batman, just like
workplace buddy comedy.
Workplace buddy comedy. It's like they run a Baskin Robbins. There's not 31 flavors.
Oh, Batman, but there is 31 flavors. Okay, all right, your number one movie.
Neapolitan counts as 3. All right, number one, and I don't think you're going to disagree with me on this. I think that you're going to think that this is the number one movie that was snubbed for Best Picture, because it is one of the greatest movies of all time, and it is Jurassic Park.
Oh my God, yes. Yes. Yes.
John Hammond wants to control wonder. This is all about control. He wants to prove that brilliance and money can tame nature and that his creation deserves admiration and not caution. The lesson learned: some forces demand humility, not mastery. Hammond learns that awe without responsibility is recklessness, and that life cannot be owned, branded, or contained. This is a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition told with dinosaurs. The villain is not the T-Rex. It's human arrogance. And that theme has aged painfully well, which is the mark of truly, truly great cinema. I saw Jurassic Park, I think 4 or 5 times in the theater. If it's on now, I can still watch it. All the remakes are trash compared to this absolute brilliant film that was truly about something. Jurassic Park was absolutely snubbed as Best Picture.
Life finds a way.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, that is a great list. Here's what I would add to it. I would add The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I would absolutely add Last of the Mohicans to that
honestly,
list.
you could do a whole thing about Michael Mann, and because Heat wasn't nominated.
Fabulous list. And those were, huge summer popcorn movies that were also the best movies of the year, and they just got snubbed because your industry is too snooty.
And God, looking at some of these that were nominated in its place, like I think The Imitation Game was one of them. I can't remember who it was nominated.
That was a really good movie, though.
It was a good movie, but like I didn't think it was better than The Spectacle. And the problem with Spectacle is people think like, oh, it's just so people can eat popcorn. Sure, but it's also really difficult to do well. And we have to honor that like it's hard to do spectacle. It's hard to do action. It's hard to do these massive set pieces. It takes 1,000 people working in tandem. And so, I'm glad that they're not snubbing these anymore. However, I do not think that F1 was worthy of an Oscar nom, and I don't think it's going to win. If there are 1 million I will give anybody listening 1,000,000 to 1 odds that it wins. Just send me your dollars and I will collect them, and I will owe no one $1 million after the Oscars.
Yep.
So that's it, Josh. That's the top 5 list that nobody asked for about the best Oscar snubbed spectacle films of all time.
Wonderful list, Jeff. Wonderful list.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Okay, that's it for me. Great conversation about the nature of competition. Josh, really appreciate any last thoughts for us.
Jeff, we didn't get into all the times you and I have competed, and especially when we were younger, and how sometimes it was mostly healthy competition, but sometimes it wasn't. And if anybody does want to know what sport Jeff and I were the absolute best at, it was a little game we call Hall Ball.
Hall Ball was such a great game. Such a great game. Do you want to describe it?
Yeah, you throw a beanbag down the hall at each other and try not to knock pictures off the wall. It was fabulous.
You try and get the beanbag past each other. It was such a great game.
So fun.
Josh, you and I are 4.5 years difference in age for listeners. And so Josh was a 9-year-old playing with a 4.5-year-old. I don't remember that many times where I thought that Josh was mean or inappropriate with how he competed. He was a great big brother in terms of competition. When I turned like 13, we could finally actually compete in some things. But for the most part, I always thought that we had healthy competition, and you did a really good job of not just like overpowering your brother. I don't know. Sure, there's some stories I'm sure we could tell. But my memory for the most part is, I felt like it was pretty healthy. But I also think that everything is healthy. So, who the hell knows?
All right. Take it away, Jeff.
Yeah. All right. Thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of F1. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. This has been a Large and in Charge production. For David Haverty, our amazing editor, and for Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.